Okay, Mr. Chair, I guess we go ahead and start.
Brian again.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Okay, I'm just trying to share the screen. Is it shared?
Yes, it does.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, let's make a start because we're in the new premises now, so let's hope the signal is okay, because the signal in this office was really good, apart from the second room that Miguel had to use. So remember last week we started to talk in general about the wider aspect of enterprise-wide risk management. So what we're going to do this week is start to pick up some of the underlying wider issues that are provided by the Basel Committee. So Miguel should have given you a while ago this presentation, New Developments in Basel III. You can find that.
That should be, yeah, that should be the pre-reading before the module 1. And then keep going and you'll see that slide.
Miguel, if I switch to our screen show, will you still be able to see it? Let me just try that.
Yeah, if you make it bigger, that'll be better.
Oh yeah, it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can still see you. Can you see the screen placed up?
Yes, we can see everything. Excellent.
Excellent. Okay. Just wait for everybody. Thanks, the presentation.
Yeah, go to pre-reading and then it should be like the third document. Pre-reading. Right after.
Isn't it?
I don't even know it. And you know that?
Okay, well, if you don't have it, try and share with someone who's got it, and then you print it out to you from the office. Okay, well, as I mentioned to you last week, the background papers that are developed by the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision, and they're a global body which are based in the town of Bar in Switzerland. And if you want to look these up yourself, you can go on to the website I mentioned last week, www.BIS, for Bank of International Settlements.org. And then when you're on that website, you'll see all of the Basel publications are actually on there. So, there may be things that you specifically are interested in. You can just type a search in on there. You'll see there's a lot of these publications. By way of background, affecting us, globally, and particularly for yourselves in Nassau, Basel I was in the 1980s, and it only touched on credit risk. So credit risk was the main feature within Basel I, and then a little bit later, when market risk activities started to be undertaken by some of the more active international branches, banks, the Basel Committee brought in an amendment which was the market risk amendment. So that was it in the beginning. And then in July 2004, we had quite a major shift, and that was the document called Basel II. And we'll look at this as well, because Basel II leads us to Basel III. When you look at Basel III, you'll find that Basel III does not replace and extinguish Basel II. Basel III is like an enhancement to Basel II. So you need to understand, Basel II to actually understand Basel III, which is the latest publication that affects us globally, and very, very useful documents in terms of risk management. So today we're going to recap on the three pillars of Basel II. You'll see there's like three divisions, or pillars they call it. And then we'll look at the G20 endorsements moving forward in terms of Basel III. And then we'll discuss, these new challenges in risk management supervision. And there's a lot of challenges because some of the documents are quite complex, and guidance, will be given by your own central bank in Nassau, same as central banks globally. And you'll see when we look at Basel III has a very strong liquidity and balance sheet focus. And the reason for that is through the global crisis that we saw evolving in 2007, 2008, where a number of financial institutions had severe liquidity problems, and this affected drastically their balance sheet positions. So you'll see some new ideas coming out within Basel III on liquidity and balance sheet focus. And then the final point there is we're having a radical change in the UK based on Turner report. Lord Turner was the chairman of the Financial Services Authority, which was the regulatory division of the Bank of England. But actually the FSA, as you see, has now ceased to exist, and the control has gone back to the Bank of England, setting up a new organisation called the Financial Conduct Authority, which leaves quite a number of countries in a difficult position because, for example, in Dubai or in Malta, just to give you two quick examples, those countries have both set up financial services authorities based on the UK model, but that's changed drastically, as we'll see. And then we also have the latest report is the Vickers report on bank structures, and you may have heard or read about the concept of ring fencing some of the merchant banking or some of the investment banking activities within the UK. So we'll come on to that as well. Okay, now here's just some breaking news just to get us thinking. Risk again. This was a big shock to us, September 2011, because when we think of UBS, the gigantic Swiss bank, We always think of the Swiss bankers by nature, being very, very cautious and very, very regulatory focused. But look at this heading. This was a shock for us in London because this was from the London office of UBS, where they employ over 600 people. Sydney Road trader Kweku Adelaboye arrested over this $2 billion UBS loss, and he's a trader. Arrested by the City of London police in connection with rogue trading. It's cost the Swiss banking giant an estimated $2 billion US. This was reported in the Telegraph on the 15th of September. The bank said in a statement, UBS has discovered this loss due to unauthorized trading. The matter has been investigated, but current estimate of loss on trades is in the region of $2 billion. Has anyone in the room heard of this particular incident? Yes? Did someone say yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how it was actually discovered?
I can't recall the start of the middle of it.
No, it was very interesting because what happened was the trader, his manager saw an entry on Facebook, which said, and you'll be interested in this, you've got so many churches in Nassau. The entry on Facebook by this young man was, "Only God can save me now." Only God can save me now. So you can imagine, as this man's manager, and he's an active trader in your department, you thought, goodness me, what the hell's going on here? So on the Monday morning, they closed these books down, closed these trading positions, and then covered this gigantic loss. And when they investigated his background, he was quite a notorious gambler in his personal capacity. He was always making bets, going to casinos, etc., etc. So not actually a very good person to have, running part of the trading desks for UBS. Now, how could he run up such a significant loss? Well, we looked at the Barings Bank case last week. You remember one of the key features of Barings was the lack of controls, remember?
Yes.
Yeah? And Nick Leeson was in charge of front office and back office. Now, this case is different, but if you looked at Dobelli's personal HR record, you'll see he worked for a number of years in the back office section, which was checking the traders' work. You can imagine working in the back office, he would know the various access codes, for the traders were using. So when the bank promoted him into the front office, they made a terrible error of judgment because he took with him, all the permission codes, etc., etc. So he knew all the compliance procedures. So they put this man who was a gambler into a position where instead of gambling his own money, he could gamble the bank's money. And look at what happened, $2 billion loss. Now a bit closer to home, you've probably heard of Mr. Stanford based on the island of Antigua. Yes?
Yeah.
Heard of this one? Now this is very important to us in terms of risk because this is where persons get involved in an investment style of risk. Now, Stanford's billionaire lifestyle, funded by years of theft and bribery, using investors' cash, used a Ponzi scheme. Do you know what a Ponzi scheme is?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So Ponzi scheme is where, Miguel has heard that me, I'm a brilliant fund manager, or I can manage his portfolios really well, and I can pay him a return on his investment much above the market rate. So Miguel invests with me, and then what I need to do is I've got to pay him above the market rate, but the gentleman in the red shirt just across from Miguel there, he's heard about Miguel's investment and how he's getting such a good return, so he decides to join the scheme. This is how a Ponzi scheme works. Now, I can only pay Miguel more than the market returns by taking some of the new money coming into the scheme. So I can cover Miguel. Now, the gentleman in the red there, how am I going to pay him? Well, the lady behind there, she's heard about my scheme, how I'm such a good investor. She invests, so I use some of her new money, to pay the gentleman in red and Miguel as well. And of course, this thing will continue, and it continues successfully as long as there's new investors coming into the scheme. But if something drastic happens in the environment or something happens globally, then
Yeah, sorry folks, it happens every now and again, that's, yeah, yeah.
and we went on there. You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. So, Stanford scheme involved a lot of people, more than 20,000 investors. Since there's been a rescue by the East Caribbean, the Amalgamated Bank, and the reconstruction has taken place. So a lot of the investors have got some of their money back, but you have to be careful with these schemes. And because this trial took place in the US, and last week we were quite surprised when Nick Leeson only got 7 years in a jail in Singapore. But look at this, I said to you, if it was America, it'd be much more severe. Stanford's got a 110-year jail sentence, and he went into jail over 60 years old, so he's going to be 170 before he ever gets out. Now, the other ironic thing, as you can see on the first bullet point there, is Stanford was listed in Forbes magazine, the US magazine. It's the 605th richest man in the world, and that's absolute rubbish because, he didn't have any money whatsoever. The only money he had was the money that he took from his investors. Now, it was very embarrassing also for us in the UK because some of the cricket matches between the West Indies and England, and I know you don't do much cricket there in Nassau, you've only got that tiny cricket ground that Miguel and I sometimes go to for a quick beer when I'm in Nassau, but the West Indies matches against England are very, very popular, and part of the sponsorship for the games, came from the Stanford Investment Bank. I've actually been in his bank, where after the collapse, myself and two colleagues, we went there to do some training within the bank. Goodness me, what a place! There's marble everywhere. All the floors are marble. There's huge gold murals on the walls. I can't show you it because you're not allowed to take any photographs. I tried to take a photograph and I was immediately stopped by the security guard, which is a shame, really. Now this one's different. This is insider trading, and as risk managers, we'll have a case on this a bit later, either today or when we meet again in 2 weeks' time. I would say that insider trading, as a risk manager, is probably the hardest type of case that you'll get because it's very, very hard indeed. So, you imagine, again, we're at the cricket club, we're having a quick beer, and if I'm like an investment manager, and I say to Miguel, by the way, I don't know if you heard, but so-and-so company's going to be listing on the stock exchange in a couple of weeks' time. It might be a good idea if you take an investment. How would anyone prove, that I give him that inside tip. So it's very, very hard. Insider trading is very, very hard to prove, particularly at the seniority level of this man. Now this one was very close to home for me because many years ago I actually worked for Barclays Bank. Bob Diamond was an American who came from London to head up the Barclays investment bank, which is called Barclays Capital. And again, interesting website to look at that I mentioned last week. If you've got a chance to look at Barclays, look at some of the risk management issues there, and you'll see Bob Diamond was chief executive at Barclays, and he was forced to resign because he was accused with some of the senior executives over rigging LIBOR. Now you might have heard of this as well. LIBOR was the London interbank offered rate. So you might imagine there are millions of transactions in banking that are priced based on this London interbank offered rate, and this rate had been rigged and manipulated by Bob Diamond and some senior executives. Now, why would they want to rig the rate? Well, the answer is if they rig the rate, they can demonstrate that they've made bigger profit. And if they've made bigger profit, of course, that means they can pay themselves bigger bonuses. And then in the end, it all came tumbling down, and Barclays were fined £290 million to settle with US and British regulators. But don't feel too sorry for Bob Diamond, because look at the payoff he got. 17 million pounds, so that's what, 30 something million US dollars. But the lady who headed up the remuneration committee, who signed this pay deal off, she outraged shareholders and she had to resign herself in the end, as you can see there, giving the excuse that she wanted to devote time to other interests. So some huge high-profile cases here. Now I mentioned about the FSA, so if you go on or try to go on the FSA website, which is www.fsa.org, you'll see this site is no longer updated. So the FSA, because they missed or were accused of missing several very high-profile risk cases in the UK, and shortly we're going to look at a summary of one of those, which Miguel's printed out for you. And it's interesting, it's called an accident waiting to happen. And this is one of the cases that FSA didn't really spot. So they themselves have been disbanded, and two new organizations, as you can see, set up the Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulatory Authority. Now, Eurozone, these next couple of slides are way out of date because we still just don't know what on earth's going to happen. We're due to leave Europe at the end of March, and we still haven't got a deal organized properly. Mrs. May, our Prime Minister, thinks she's got a deal, but the members of Parliament, they're not voting for it. Some of them are in favour, some of them are not. The whole thing's a total mess. And unfortunately, it's like if anybody's been divorced, you'll know what a terrible rigmarole these things are. And this is just the same, UK trying to get divorced from Europe. And the latest divorce bill is £40 billion we're going to have to pay Europe to get out of Europe. Goodness me, that's a large amount of money. So this one's at a dead end or crossroads, we just don't know. Dead end or crossroads, we don't know. Let me move on. Okay, now this is the press release, which I think Miguel probably put in your handouts as pre-reading. So we're not going to go through that just a moment. But did you have that press release handout?
That's just before
Yes.
the new developments.
Excellent. Excellent. Now the key, this is like a lot of the Basel documents. Quite often, some of the very, very interesting and informative information is right at the end. So if you just flick to the end, I can't quite show that to you at the moment on the screen, but if you go to the end of that document, you will see there's a chart with a time scale on, and you'll see there's various headings down the left-hand side. You see that? I'll bring that on the screen a bit later. So keep your eye on that, because that will help us as we discuss some of these issues that are coming in under Basel III. So you'll see, glancing at that left-hand side, you'll see there's strengthening by way of capital conservation buffers. There's new liquidity ratios coming in. There's a leverage ratio coming in, etc. So keep your eye on that while we progress through some more of these slides. So what you'll see is risk managers, and very much for the lady from the Central Bank, if you're here today, the Basel III is a complex topic, and it means challenges to the way in which we manage financial institutions. Now, having said that, of course, different countries and different regions will face some unique difficulties in adoption and implementation, depending, on your economy and your structural issues. So there'll be a strong interpretation from your central bank in Bahamas there, of how these things will affect you in Nassau. However, whatever implementation direction is taken, Basel III globally will help provide a framework for firm-wide risk management. And I mentioned to you last week, we were quite pleased when this came out, because we've had this program with Miguel and Biffs for quite a number of years in Nassau, and as you know, it's called Enterprise-Wide Risk Management. So we're quite pleased when Basel have brought out this title, Firm-Wide Risk Management, because it's exactly the same, and it's designed to include all those risks facing the business. And that of course is your job, and that's the tricky part, because it's like a galaxy of risks. There's all these different risks, and we do our best to spot and pinpoint and try and manage them. But the trouble is with risk management, there'll be some risks that are just totally unexpected and unforeseen. Now here's a summary, not of Basel III, but of Basel II, because I did say to you, we need to have a good understanding of Basel II before we can progress to Basel III, because Basel III, I'll just repeat myself again, is Basel III is an enhancement to Basel II. Some people prefer the term, as a development from Basel II. So Basel II came out as long ago as July 2004, but a number of countries are still struggling to implement Basel II. And interesting enough, China, where you would think, with their vast economy and vast developments, they only started to implement Basel II with some of the large Chinese banks, just 3 or 4 years ago. So they were very much behind in terms of these regulatory issues. But if you look at any of the large Chinese banks now, and again, a good website for you to look at if you're interested would be Bank of China. This Bank of China is now one of the 30 largest banks in the world. If you look at Bank of China website, you'll see they're very, very focused in their risk management, reporting on Basel II and giving outlines for risk management. So Basel II covered this aspect of the 3 pillars. So pillar 1 is the mathematics. So those people who really like maths, they'll enjoy the pillar 1, where it talks about the mathematical calculations to come up with the minimum capital requirement for your particular financial institution. Then pillar 2 is the one that most of us here today are more interested in, because that talks about supervisory review processes, so that affects us as risk managers, affects people who are in compliance, affects the directors in terms of risk management. And Pillar 3, you're interested in Pillar 3, but you would not be formulating Pillar 3 because Pillar 3 is formulated by the Board of Directors. And if someone is on the Board of Directors, well, they'll be involved in Pillar 3 disclosure and market discipline. So Pillar 3 is about the directors disclosing what they're doing in terms of risk management practices. So the three pillars, three very different pillars, but interconnected as we'll see. Now this next diagram took quite a long time to put together, and those of you who might want to look at Basel II at some stage, because it's a PDF document, you can download it from the bis.org website, and it's Basel II, and you can download sections you're interested in. You know, if you're interested only in operational risk, you can download the operational section. It's a PDF, it's over 200 pages. It's very comprehensive. Some useful templates for risk management towards the end of the document, which we will be using some of them. Excuse me. And then this is summarizing the document. So Pillar 1, capital strategy, and there's the maths. Look, you can see the mathematics are split between credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. And credit risk being tackled, for example, on 3 different systems. There's a standardized approach, which the central bank give you guidance on. Then there's a kind of intermediate position where your financial institution will develop some risk-based metrics for credit, and they can be mixed together with the standard bank directives, central bank directives, but it has to be signed off by the central bank supervisors. Now, lots of banks internationally, and I'm sure in Nassau, some of the banks in Nassau will be on this intermediate approach, which is called internal ratings-based. Internal ratings-based, that's what IRB stands for, and this is encouraged by Basel. And then the kind of holy grail of credit is where you yourselves do everything, and this is where the financial institution rates everything to do with credit risk by its own risk-based methodologies, but again, it's got to be signed off by the central bank. So you might imagine there's not that many banks on that. It's quite a complex topic. Now, market risk, again, there's a standardized approach which will be set by the central bank, and the more complex market risk trading banks will use a method called value at risk, which some of you may have heard of, and you'll see this developed within your market risk module that you'll be looking at. Operational risk, I won't say too much about because you'll have this covered in another module. Miguel, is that Sam that's covering operational risk?
Yes, he will. He'll be covering operational risk and credit risk.
So he'll talk to you, excuse me, he'll talk to you about these 3 different approaches. Now for us as risk managers, you can see Pillar 2 is very strong. So we're going to need to have an awareness of what the institution's doing in the Pillar 1, because we need to make sure that there's compliance, within the Pillar 1 system that the institution's using. But then, under Pillar 2, we need to make sure we have compliance under those headings. Look, can you see the 3 headings there? Creating a risk culture, by way of HR, communications, good risk reporting, training, approved persons that we discussed last week, and then very, very strong procedure manuals, because when you get a site visit from the central bank, one of the things they'll be looking for will be your risk procedure manuals. You might not have one, or if it's quite complex, you might have 2 or 3 different areas. Then risk management section there. Are we compliant with regulations? What's our organizational structure for risk management? Have we got a system for categorizing risks? Can we assess the risks? And can we improve our risk processes? And then on the right-hand side there of the diagram, risk event handling. And again, I mentioned this briefly last week, but we really need to build up this risk event database. The Basel Committee recommend a minimum of 3 years. 5 years is better if you can do it. Now lots of institutions, they do have risk event reporting, but it tends to be very fragmented. So for example, if you're in a commercial bank there and you've got a number of branches, the branch may well have their own log or register of risk events, but what Basel are recommending is these are coordinated centrally so that the control function centrally can get a better picture of the overall risk management. And then just at the top box there, I'll try and just move the pictures slightly if I can. Just in the top box there, you'll see pillar 3 is the disclosure. That's from the board of directors, disclosing what their strategies are for group.
This folks, let's see if we can get back on. Hi, Mr. Checkley, we're back.
Go, you shouldn't have moved. When you moved, it went down.
I know.
When you walked across the room, you did something.
Must he destroy the signal, yo?
Can you see us through the screen, or do I need to share it again?
Yeah, I know, you need to share it again, sorry for that.
Yeah. We were going pretty good.
Yeah.
Until you moved, you bad boy.
Alright.
Alright, let's get back to it. So, can you see it's shared now?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so yeah, it's quite a comprehensive diagram. And if you're in discussion with some of your colleagues and they're saying to you, well, we've heard of this Basel II and risk management, can you help us? Well, this diagram, I hope you agree, is pretty useful because it encapsulates a lot of information, on one page there. So moving forward to Basel III. So how is Basel III different? Well, Basel III you can see under Pillar 1. So Basel III takes the Pillar 2, Pillar 1, and it looks for enhanced minimum capital. So it's looking for more capital within the financial institution's balance sheet, by way of a buffer against possible downside risks. And then you can also see this liquidity requirement coming in. So that was new. And we'll look at the thoughts behind that shortly. Pillar 2, remember that's the supervisory review process. But again, that's going to be enhanced. And then Pillar 3, enhanced risk disclosure and market discipline. So here's an extract from the actual document. which you have a copy of. So this document will represent the Basel Committee's reforms to strengthen, so if you want to underline that in your notes there, strengthen global capital and liquidity rules with the goal of promoting a more resilient banking sector. So it's a very, very important step. And, I can't predict the exam questions, but we're getting a lot of static coming through from Miguel passing up materials now. See global capital and liquidity rules coming in. And again, something to probably highlight, the objective of the reforms is to improve the banking sector's ability to absorb shocks from whatever the source, reducing the risk of spillovers to the real economy. So two very important bullet points there for you. So the comprehensive reform package addresses lessons from the financial crisis. So we're going to do this coming into practice. And you just skip the next slide, the next one. So this slide's important because the market lost confidence in solvency and liquidity of many banking institutions, and that's where, this phrase came forward, which I'm sure you'll have heard, too big to fail. And this affected some of the US banks and some banks in the UK, as we will see these gigantic banking institutions being classified as too big to fail, except in the States with Lehman Brothers, where you remember Lehman Brothers did fail and went into liquidation. And although Lehman's were reporting huge profits, when you went behind the scenes, they had huge amounts of leverage. They were 28 times leveraged, so enormous leverage. Okay, now what we're going to do is, just to enforce this section here, is take a look at that case study that Miguel passed out. An accident waiting to happen. So if you can find that case study, well, I'll just try and find it. Now, can we still see the document on the screen?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, now the first place to head for is table 1. Can you see table 1 is probably the second page in your document?
Yes.
Now, what I'd like you to do is either working on your own, or better still, if you're sitting next to somebody, have a look at this table and see what you can learn from this table. Now, in table 1 you can see the year 2001 and the year 2008. Now, you can also see CAGR. Now, just ignore that column for the moment, because that column is a bit misleading. And what I want you to concentrate on is the growth between the year 2001 and 2008. So have a look at that. I'm just going to silence my mic for say 5 minutes or so, while you take a look at this. So for example, you can see the growth in customer loans on a group basis. So have a look at that, see what you can see. I'll switch my mic off just for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so who'd like to start us off? Anything you're concerned about as risk manager?
Loan rate growth is fast, outpacing deposit rate growth. That's going to be a problem.
Yep, very good, well done. Yeah, so if you look, this is why I said that CAGR column is a bit misleading because it looks like 12.6%. But actually, the customer loans on a group basis, they've more than doubled, haven't they?
One double.
Yeah. So whereabouts on the balance sheet does that go? On a bank's balance sheet? Liabilities or assets? So that's a tricky question. Because normally when we look at a business person's balance sheet
Deposit.
and we see loans, you know, that's on as a liability, isn't it?
It's an asset.
Yeah, but the bank's the other way around. It's an asset. So you can think of that as the debtors, yeah? So the debtors in a business person's balance sheet are in as an asset. You might use the American term receivables, and they'll be on the balance sheet as an asset. So you can see the assets have more than doubled. So, you know, the receivables have more than doubled, which will need financing. Now, as the gentleman mentioned, where are they going to finance those from? Well, customers' deposits. How much have they increased by?
8%.
No. They've gone from 140 to 222. So that's what, roughly 50% more, do you think? Yeah. So what you're seeing then is an expansion of assets on the balance sheet that require financing, but the source of financing is only increased by 50%, whereas the assets have increased by more than 100%. So when you think about profitability, this organization is going to be very profitable because, you know, they're writing a lot more customer loans on which they should make profit. So if you look at the shareholders' funds, so that's like a capital position, look at how strong that looks. At face value, it's gone from 9.8 billion, so you can see the size of the organisation, to over 17 billion. So it looks as if they're trading very, very profitably. But look at the next line. What does that tell us? And the line after, so three very important lines there. Loans to deposits, wholesale funding, so that's borrowing money in the capital markets for less than 1 year, so it's short-term sources of cash flow. And then leverage, so that's how many times the bank's position is leveraged. So think of that as kind of like the gearing that we talk about. So are those three ratios giving warning signals or not? What do you think? Yeah, they are. There are three warning signals. So the relationship of loans to deposits has gone to almost double. Now wholesale funding, that's borrowing in the money markets, has gone up. That's overnight money from 89 to 119. And leverage. So what you're looking at is why this document is called an accident waiting to happen. Now, you can see this at a glance. So why on earth couldn't the directors of this very, very large financial institution in the UK see that there was a problem? What did you say there, lady? There?
Young folk blind.
Yeah. When we're talking, sometimes people talk about selective hearing. When you don't want to hear somebody, whatever they're saying, that's what men generally do with their wife, isn't it? Selective hearing. But we can hear what the other men are saying, but for some reason we don't. Or maybe your girlfriend, you might hear very nicely what she's saying. Okay, I'll stop the jokes because Miguel will start telling me off if I tell too many jokes. Yeah, so this is probably selective viewing on their part. Why? Because they're declaring huge profits, aren't they? And if they're declaring huge profits, it means huge bonuses for the people at the top. So let's have a look. So what we're worried about really is the liquidity position. And Miguel's now holding his head in his hands because he didn't like the term liquidity. He probably prefers the term cash flow, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You prefer that, Miguel?
Yep.
Cash flow position, yeah. So let's go back and take a look at this parliamentary inquiry, okay? So if you wanted to read more about it, you can. If you go on to the Parliament, this Parliament in the UK website, and all I've done is I've done an extract for you, and this was the Parliament inquiry. So, they interviewed the directors, they looked at other situations, and this is what they came up with. I've highlighted some of the words for you there, and it's very, very small for me on the screen. Let me just try and enlarge it slightly. Not too much. So HBOS, for those of you who don't know who these people are, HBOS was a merger between the Bank of Scotland, that's the boss bit, and Halifax. Now these were two very different entities. The Halifax had been the UK's largest building society, and a building society in the UK typically takes deposits from their customers and lends money to personal customers in order that they can buy their own property, their own home, yes? So when you think about it, that type of operation, the business model is actually flawed right from the start. Because the building society is taking deposits which can be short term, and then they lend long term, don't they? You by way of a mortgage, 15 years, 20 years, maybe 25 years. Now it works as long as they manage it carefully so the cash flow positions are sustained by the borrowers usually paying monthly, yes? So they pay monthly for the mortgages. Now, BOSS, we're a different type of organisation, they're a commercial bank. So the two of them coming together would be very different from cultural aspect, very different from business model aspect, and therefore the strategy of the two coming together would be very, very important. So, point number 12 there, since the 1970s, BOSS had followed a successful strategy of organic market share growth. So, you know, they never made any acquisitions, they never organically. Okay, we're back again.
Yeah, we're back again. Sorry about that, folks.
Is the screen still sharp again?
Yes, it's still there.
Okay, great. So you can see, look, the two of them coming together there. And then point number 14, looks, you can see the size of this organisation. Creation of HBOS had the effect of turning Big Four banking groups in the UK to Big Five. HBOS had total assets of £275 billion, larger than Lloyd's, and 3/4 of the size of Barclays and of the Royal Bank of Scotland. In its first annual report, HBOS described itself as the new force in banking, and the new group saw an opportunity to benefit from its increased scale and from distributing its broadened product range to an enlarged customer base. It set medium-term targets to achieve product market shares near the 15 to 20% that Halifax had enjoyed in core markets. Now the Chief Executive, this is under point 15, gave a public target for the new group to increase return on equity, so that's profit relative to the equity base, from an underlying figure of 17%, which is actually very good as it stands, to 20%, you know, which is a huge demanding target in banking. I mean, the average in the UK at the moment lies between 10 and 15%. So you can see targeting a return on equity of 20% is an extremely high target. So let's look at the next page. That was the table you saw. So here's the comment on that table that you were looking at. So table 1 underlines that in the period after its creation, HBOS pursued a strategy of asset-led growth, expanding its lending significantly faster than its deposits, which it picked up very good. Total group loans grew at a compound rate of 13%, which, as I said to you, is slightly misleading. It's better to look at the figure, which has actually increased by more than 100%. Customer deposits rose only 8% per annum. So, well, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this slower growth was due to slower retail expansion. Mather will discuss later, but the effect of growth in assets outstripping growth in customer deposits was to increase the bank's reliance on wholesale funding, the consequence of which we will explore later in this report. Well, what's going to happen? This period is very significant. So there we have, look, this reliance in 2008 on the wholesale money markets. Why? To prop up the cash flow, or to use a more sophisticated word, to prop up, the bank's liquidity position. And of course, what happens in 2008? We discussed already. Oh, sorry. Sounds like we've got a phone ringing now. The global crisis, yes? So what was one of the effects of the global crisis on the money markets? No one got any comment on that? Well, what was the effect of the global crisis on the wholesale markets, wholesale money markets? Well, globally the money markets froze, yeah, which caused the liquidity crisis. Which means, if you imagine you're the chief executive and you're balancing your books every night by going into the money markets and borrowing temporary funds, what happens if you can't do that? Where can you go for cash flow? Well, you could maybe go to the stock market, but that's going to take time, and you haven't got time. Who is the lender of the last resort?
Central bank.
In any country? Yeah, the central bank. So Halifax, HBOS rather, HBOS had to go to the Bank of England and say, look, we need a bailout. And this is Obama, isn't it? Wow. Obama's favourite expression, bailout or bust.
Yeah.
And this bank is too big to fail, was the view of the British government. So they received a bailout from the Bank of England. And it's a huge figure, as we'll see shortly. But let's look at the commentary on this first. Look at point number 19. This is absolutely shocking. Point number 19. The strategy set by the board of directors from the creation of the new group sowed the seeds of its destruction. HBOS set a strategy for aggressive, asset-led growth across divisions over a sustained period. This involved accepting more risk across all divisions of the group, although many of the strengths of the two brands within HBOS largely persisted at branch level. The strategy created a new culture in the higher echelons of the bank, that means senior management. And look at what happens with senior management. The culture was brash. You know what brash means? Underpinned by a belief that the growing market share was due to a special set of skills which HBOS possessed and which its competitors lacked. So that's ridiculous. So these people are deluding themselves into thinking, well, the reason we're growing so quickly, so well, is we've got special skills that the competition don't have. Now the bit I underlined in blue, I don't know if it's come out in colour on your handout there, but the effect of this culture was more corrosive when coupled with a lack of corporate self-knowledge at the top of the organisation. So some of the directors, weren't themselves sufficiently competent to manage an organisation of this size. So this enabled the leaders, these senior managers, to persist in the belief, in some cases to this very day of this report, that HBOS was a conservative institution when in fact it was the very opposite. Now you looked at the growth figures, growing by over 100% in your loan book is hardly a conservative approach. Yeah? So this was a disastrous case. Any comments on that so far, or are you all clear on that? It's hard to believe these things happen. So this is one of the examples. So this was a severe episode, market lost confidence, insolvency, and the liquidity, and the public sector had to step in, as in the case of HBOS. So towards Basel III, to address these market failures, in the US and in the UK and in certain parts of Europe as well, there was a Spanish bank went into a terrible position. To address the committee introducing some fundamental reforms. So part of this would be the strengthening of the balance sheet, as we'll see, and building on the quality. Second bullet point, important point here, you might get a question on this. Reforms raise both the quality and the quantity of the capital base and enhance risk coverage of the capital framework. So what we're going to see is more capital coming into the institution and better quality capital, as we see shortly, with some risk coverage ideas. And these are underpinned by leverage ratio, which intends to constrain excess leverage in the banking system. So another thing to highlight, the leverage ratio intended to constrain excess leverage, such as you've just seen in the case of HBOS, and you heard me talking about Lehman Brothers being 28 times leveraged. So in summary of that document that you've got there, Pillar 1, raising quality and capital and quantity, plus 2 conservation buffers there, and then the leverage ratio coming in, plus liquidity standards and ratios, and then we've got this last part here, which I'll talk a bit more about later, systemically important financial institutions. Now, if you're interested in a list of those, if you just simply do a Google or Yahoo search, you'll see there are just over 30 of these systemically important financial institutions, known as SIFIs, globally. And I mentioned Bank of China, they are one of the 2 Chinese banks that's made their way into this list. And these huge organizations have got to hold more capital than the normal financial institutions because they're deemed to be systemically important. Now here's the chart I was mentioning earlier that you've got towards the back of one of the documents that Miguel printed out for you. And you can see all those things on the left-hand side there. Leverage ratios, increasing in capital positions, and then the 2 liquidity coverage ratios at the bottom there. One is short-term liquidity coverage, and the other is classified as a stable funding ratio. Now you won't need to know detailed mathematics on these, but what you will need to know is just sufficient, that's in the handouts there, to enable you to answer any questions that might be set on this section. Capital conservation, counter-cyclical, we mentioned, counter-cyclical. Okay, let's flip forward to this next slide, which says, is a leverage ratio needed? Well, I think the answer would be yes from what we saw on the HBOS group, and from what you heard about Lehman Brothers. But let's take a look at another example from the UK. Now, this time I'm not giving you a whole mass of figures, I'm just giving you one diagram, which is this graph. Now, some of you may have heard of the Northern Rock. Northern Rock in the UK, just like Halifax, before Halifax, a major building society, Northern Rock same, taking deposits from customers, lending out to personal customers to buy their own property. Now, what happened in 1998 is a new chief executive came in to the Northern Rock Building Society, and if I had been a shareholder in Northern Rock, when this man made the statement that was in the press, just like being in the Nassau Guardian, I would have sold my shares straight away, because the new chief executive said, I'm going to wake up the sleeping giant. And what do you think about that as a statement? Warning signal? Yeah, come on, in Nassau we're very aware of this type of bullshitting or bravado, or whatever you like to call it, talking the talk. So there you are, look at the balance sheet in 1998, you can see total assets there, and you can see the brown line, retail funds and deposits, and you can see the equity base, and then look at what happens in his direction of just under 10 years. Oh my God, look at that balance sheet. It's stressed right out. Can you see the dark blue line? Do you have this in colour in your slides?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Well done, Miguel. So you can see blue is the equity base, but look at that tiny amount of equity to fund all of those balance sheet assets.
Wow.
So it's tiny, isn't it?
Yeah.
And can you see that purple section? What the hell is that? What's the Building Society doing, being involved in securitized notes? When they have a simple business model of taking in deposits and making loans to people like me and you, to buy their own property. Anyway, securitized notes, this is where they decided they'd invest in some of these new sort of whizzy, esoteric products that came in from the USA, the Wall Street bankers, selling securitization. Oh no. And some of these were things that you've heard of, like collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, asset-backed securities, all these things that at face value, if you said, well, just a second, what's this collateralized debt obligation? You'd be told, oh, well, don't worry about it because the obligation is secured, it's collateralized by the property and by the cash flows from the borrower's repayments. So that sounds brilliant, doesn't it? You've got the property and you've got the cash flows. But of course, what happened in the end, we all know, it was in fact subprime mortgage lending. And of course, subprime means low quality, and this was all those financings in the US, which led to terrible problems that you've seen in states such as Florida, and in the southern states where reportedly one bank made a $300,000 loan to a man who was picking cotton in the fields, and you can guess what sort of hourly wage he'd be on, but he got a $300,000 loan from an American bank. So they mushroomed it right up. So again, how can they sustain it? Only one way. Same story, getting a bit bored now, sorry about that. From the overnight money market, and then bam, down it goes. So this is leverage. So the leverage ratio, just flipping forward a few slides, is the leverage ratio coming in will be a relationship between the tier 1 capital, so that's the main capital base, and the total assets. So this will be a constraint on the balance sheet. Now the extent of the ratio will be set by your central bank. Is the lady there today from central bank?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Do you know what the leverage ratio is, or maybe being introduced in NASA? Have we not got as far as that yet? No, not yet. Okay, well, this will be coming in because it's a good idea. You know, it's meant to just avoid the situations that we're being seen so far. So the other aspects are global liquidity standards. These two ratios I mentioned. I just looked forward to, we see them, here's the two ratios, if you fast forward. Again, in the exam you won't be required to make this mathematical calculation, but it's a good idea, you know, to have an idea of what this actually is. So there's two ratios coming in. Liquidity coverage ratio is given there, short term, time horizon 30 days. And then the net stable funding ratio, again the mathematics you don't need to be aware of, with the time horizon over 1 year. So the LCR and the net stable funding ratio. Okay, now another organization that BIFS does some partnering with is CISI.org, that's the Chartered Institute for Securities Investment based in London. They're a global organization, and what they've come up with is this one page. It's similar to the one page I was showing you, but I thought it's worthwhile putting this into your notes because, again, it's a summary look. It's a summary of Basel III. There's the capital position, risk coverage, containing leverage, risk management and supervision, and Pillar 3,
Okay, we're back. Are you there, Chuckley?
okay, we're coming back.
Yeah, sorry about that again.
Yeah, I don't think the signal in that room's as good as the signal in your offices, Mayor.
No.
Everything else, you're nice and comfortable, but the signal keeps going down. Everything's got its pluses and minuses. So if we go to this slide, just after the CSI one, this is this Independent Commission on Banking report that was commissioned by the UK government. Now, you only need to know two main things from this report. So the first slide you can see is the recommendation was to create a more stable and competitive basis for UK banking in the longer term. You know, because we've seen the HBOS situation, we've seen the Northern Rock situation that we looked at, and there are others that we're not covering today, but we will cover, you know, as you move forward during the program, to try and create an industry which would have a greater resilience. Now, what we need to do now is fast forward to just try and find it. this is it, just 3 slides from the end. So this is what you may have heard of as mentioned, this term ring fencing. Now ring fencing is coming in, and if, for example, you look at the Barclays website, or if you prefer, you could look at Lloyds Bank website, you'll see within the discussion, annual report, and accounts, or within the press releases and media releases, they talk about this ring fencing. So the idea is, for example, with Barclays, remember Barclays Capital was the investment banking division of the Barclays Group, and that was headed up by Bob Diamond. And in the Lloyds Bank situation, their investment banking business was again all intermeshed with the global bank. What the Commission reports come up with basically is it would be safer for the industry and for the depositors if the investment banking activities in these large commercial banks were ring-fenced. So what you're going to see is a ring-fencing of activities to in fact separate them more effectively from the global business. So the objective of such a ring fence would be to isolate those banking activities where continuous provision of service is vital to the economy and to a bank's customers. So you might want to highlight that because again, you might get a question on that. So the objective of such a ring fence would be to isolate those banking activities where continuous provision of service is vital. So in other words, if you look at this huge global bank, what's the key services that are essential, to the person in the street? And then the extent of that would be that the global wholesale investment banking should be outside of this ring fence. So that's the idea of this. I know that's not a very good explanation, but it's enough explanation for you because it's just starting to happen right now in the UK. So, we haven't seen yet whether it's going to be effective or not. All we're saying is in 2019, a start of this process of ring fencing of these activities. Okay, well, I'm going to stop on the slide presentation there. And what I'd like to look at now is another risk management case study. So if you can, and Miguel will help you find these. This is the risk management cases. Everybody got these? Now what I'd like to look at with you is not the Stanford case, we talked about that. Now this case here, I think this is a really interesting case because this concerns, not the governor of the Central Bank of Bahamas, but the governor of the Swiss National Bank. So this is an interesting case. So take a look at this. It'll take you probably 5 minutes to 10 minutes to read it through. When you're reading through, highlight things that catch your eye. And then we're going to have a discussion on this case. So you're looking for things that catch your eye as risk managers. So I'll just mute my microphone just for 10 minutes, and you can have a look at this case. Okay, is everyone read it through? Okay, what we usually do when we run this case is we have little discussion groups, just for say 10 minutes talking amongst yourselves, and then we'll debate it. So can you like turn around to the person behind you or the persons next to you to discuss this case? Can you help with something again? So we can get organized.
They could do it in groups of the tables.
Yeah.
It's okay, 10 minutes discussing with each other and then we'll debate it. So what's been going on here? Why has he resigned? What's the facts of the case?
Talking about work, saying something the challenges we face and so forth. Even the very fact that he just said, you know what, I'm considering putting capital. And he already got it. That's that. And you heard me. Replacing that. Sometimes features. How's your day? What's going on? It's hard. But that's why he actually started he could not prove that another house that's the nature. Even in Dallas. So the very fact that he says how can that he didn't mention that he talked about the world. That's what Carol, that's what I've been in
But still, how can I prove that? How can I prove that that's what you're trying to do? So if you feel like at this point stage, you know, it's understanding that people can say it's okay condition. goes in there, she admits that she transacts something that she has information. I'm not saying that when I don't like this, because you can't live in a peace unless you have to
But what also, that kind of gave us stuff is that he himself was afraid of it again.
But he was a profitable.
Under normal circumstances. And the only way to actually make profit was everybody else got right from a parliamentary side and get to the second part of the state. When they had a visitor, the public applied because nobody else making this kind of money in this market. Only us. So that's why.
But it's a lot of money, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter.
42,000.
Yeah.
Pounds is
Yes.
big profit. That's a 20 plus 20% return. And so it was hard that nobody else was able to make this kind of return. Which she knew that I didn't. People who did this on a daily basis. She's a casual trade.
She said she hasn't done it in a while.
Yes, 15 years. That's what watching the market. She doesn't trade every day. She's an art or collecting art. She's in watching the stock market and the money market. No, she was just doing
No, but in the first days, like, she was supposed to be, so I know.
So he spilled the beans somewhere. That's
Innocently.
innocently. And that's why even after his resignation, Theodore came to his character and fantasy, like he's being known as integrity, the system was gonna miss him. Because he couldn't prove that I never said this in my life. So it's hard enough to talk.
And sometimes, like, she said she didn't think, so now that's sometimes, now you don't have to go back to the position that you were, which I was going to connection.
And then the silent trades. Winners are $1,000. How can you go like and he didn't know what he liked to do. $500 million. Yeah, you're in the right. She actually don't have so it's hard
You off?
Yeah.
so to me, it's someone who is something market on the day. Usually, pick by way of talking. I'm trying to see if I'm great. time term.
That's a shame we lost it again.
Okay, sorry about that.
So that room at Pips, is that the biggest room you've got, Miguel? Or do you have a bigger room?
Where at the institute? We do, but we have two other bigger classes in that room as well. Both morning and afternoon.
Okay, so you've had a chance to talk about the case, so who would like to put forward some views? So you got the microphone near you?
Well, I guess overall, when you look at the relationship, like he said, conclusive proof was what he was talking about. The fact that he was not able to say for sure that him and his wife, I guess, did not have a conversation. She didn't get the information from him, something of that nature, that, you know, there was some sort of dealings in the sort.
Yeah, it's quite a difficult case because if you look at let me just move it on the screen. Yeah, that paragraph there where I'm pointing with the mouse, she said Mr. Silverman said her decision to trade was based on her experience.
Correct.
And professionally, she had formerly worked for hedge fund More Capital as a foreign exchange trader.
15 years.
15 years ago.
So she had the expertise.
Yeah, while working there at More Capital 15 years ago, that's where she met Mr. Hildebrand, who was working for them as well.
Correct. So,
Before he became the governor, yes. So, as I said to you earlier on, you know, this aspect of insider trading or, you know, this type of situation is extremely difficult.
yes.
Because the other fact in the case is that she would, because of that trading activity so many years ago, and because of her working, you know, in art, international art business.
That's right.
You know, any international art business, as you well know, most businesses, international businesses, are US dollar based, don't they?
Yes.
You know, they're generally, so the art businesses internationally wouldn't be Swiss franc based, it would be US dollar based. And there was that recent auction just last week in the US. So she would have knowledge of the US dollar movements through her previous job and also through her current business. So that's on one side of the scales. But on the other side of the scales, there's the fact that he would definitely know as central bank governor that the Swiss National Bank would be going to intervene in currency. Why? To cap the value of the Swiss franc. Yeah, so he would know that. So I don't want to use the expression pillow talk because it might not be that might not be appropriate. So what do you think on the other side? We have views from a lady there. Any other people have some views? Gentleman in the red, you've always got plenty to say, the red cap.
There we go, I sit next to her.
So you are, okay, sorry.
I share similar concerns in that it's hard to prove there wasn't some, just by mere mention of the intent, as husband and wife talk at the end of the day, or how's your work and so forth, that he may not have slipped something by casual talk, and that she acted upon. So it's a hard case to prove insider trading. Her knowledge in the market does provide some degree of credibility to her action, but at the same time it's inconclusive.
Yeah, but at the same time, it doesn't prove or disprove, as you say, if he said something or if he didn't.
Correct.
Yeah, and if it's going to be such a significant event as a dramatic intervention of capping of capping the value of the currency, you know, it's a bit hard to believe that he wouldn't have mentioned that, you know, to his wife, just maybe, you know, just like you say, you know, how was your day today? Oh, pretty tough because we're going to possibly be capping the value of the Swiss franc. But I mean, when you look at the figures, which is
It's not significant.
It's
I
wrong
mean,
in.
it's insignificant.
it is against his job. I mean, £45,000, yeah. So say 70,000 US dollars
Yeah.
to risk your husband's job as the Swiss National Bank governor. It's ridiculous.
Where he's probably making, God knows how much more than that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's insignificant to the man's reputation.
To me, which I feel, his decision to step down may have, I mean, everybody still speaks about how ethical he was and so forth. So that may have actually preserved his, integrity and his respect within the community. Hence, I don't think, you know.
I'd agree, because as you move towards the end of the first page, you know, there's the UK Sir Mervyn King, who was governor of the Bank of England at the time, saying he was saddened by the resignation, because we know him as a man of total integrity, extraordinary ability, and most important of all, his courage. Such people are rare. So he obviously thought very, very highly of them, and it's such a sensitive situation. And at the bottom of the first page, Switzerland, there were calls for resignation of, and I can't even read his name, Hagen Bass, the head of the Swiss National Bank's Supervisory Committee, as the governor's departure failed to stop political anger. So it's a really, really serious case, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then when you start on the second page, there's a total other thing that comes in, which again, as risk managers, you're going to be very, very aware of, and that's whistleblowing. You know, whistleblowing is a really, really difficult thing, because if you think something's that serious that you're going to blow the whistle on somebody, you know, you could be hounded if they find out it was you that did the whistleblowing. But some people will take a chance because they think it's very, very important. So what happens in this case of the whistleblowing? How has that happened? Look at the third paragraph in the second page.
An investigation by PricewaterhouseCoopers has a report.
Yes? Yes? So there's two more people involved there. Yeah, and also the Saracen Bank IT support employee who took screenshots and passed them on to these other two guys. So what's the policy in Nassau? Do you have investigations into whistleblowing or not?
Yes.
There are policies in place, protecting the.
For protecting, that's good. Yeah.
That's internal. I don't know. That's internal.
Yeah, there's another case in this pack that we won't get to, but it's towards the end. It's the Japanese photography case. Look right at the back, look. Olympus, you all heard of Olympus cameras. It's a globally important business. Look at what happens here. The whistleblower this time is the president, or more particularly described as the former president. So this man was actually fired because he blew the whistle on the board of directors, and he was the chief executive.
They obviously didn't have an act.
And if you look at the next page, you'll see that there's more detail on it. Okay, well, just for the last 5 minutes, Miguel has a case that he needs to hand out to you because we don't meet again for 2 weeks. So what I'd like you to try and do is something you just so what you're going to see is he's going to give out this case called Bank A, Bank B. So what I need you to do is try and read it before we meet in 2 weeks' time. Okay, so I'll focus your reading. If you could just take a look for a moment or two at the screen there, where I'm going to just spend a few minutes talking to you with a bit more background on this case. So there's quite a lot of paperwork. Okay. Okay, Miguel, everybody got it?
Yeah, everybody has.
So Miguel, can I ask you the document on the screen, which is the brief?
I'll keep that.
Did you have this brief as well?
Yeah, I do have the brief. I didn't give it out.
Oh, you haven't given it up, okay. Well, you'll email it to you.
No, I mean, do you want me to give it out or no?
Well, you've got it, have you?
Yeah, I have it.
Thanks. That'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffrey,
Yes, hello?
I have a question.
Yep,
In the case with the Mrs. Hildebrand,
yes?
is there anything that she could have done to protect herself within her permanent position as this guy's wife? So she knew that she was speculating in the currency market,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for her, for instance, would she have been protected if she formed a company and the board of this company made decisions in terms of currency trades? So then that board would be like her witness that she didn't make this decision on her own because of some information she got?
Yeah.
What could
It's
she have
a,
done?
it's a really tough question, and it's probably best answered by a lawyer and not by me, because it's very tricky. There may have been certain things that she could have done, to declare her interest in this. So something may have been able to have been done, because at the end of the day, as we discussed, the amount of money, at about $65,000, $70,000, okay, it's a lot of money to us, but it's a very small amount, relative to his position as the governor of the Swiss National Bank. So I think with like maybe there's something she could have done, but I'm not too sure, what it would actually be. Maybe she could make some sort of declaration of trust or something. I'm not too sure. Okay, very good question, very pertinent question. So finally, if we take a look at this Bank A, Bank B, let me just give you a little bit of the background before we close. So what you see when you read these documents, what you'll see is Bank A is trying to acquire Bank B. So you might want to make a note of that. Bank A is trying to acquire Bank B to make these two banks come together. Now, what you'll also see when you read it, that this is something that's known as a hostile acquisition, because Bank B, do not want to be bought by Bank A. So Bank B would rather stand alone. So what we're going to end up with is a series of options. So just to start again, Bank A wants to buy Bank B, but it's a hostile takeover. So Bank A will have to persuade Bank B's shareholders that it's a good idea. Now also within the document you can see that another bank comes along. Now this often happens when there's a hostile takeover bid, that another firm will think, oh, there's something going on here, perhaps I need to take a look at this, and perhaps I need to make a bid. So you'll find the alternative bank is BOSS, and BOSS are making an alternative bid to acquire Bank B. So what you're going to end up with is a series of options. Bank A trying to get Bank B preferring to stay on its own, and then BOSS trying to acquire Bank B as well. So that's to give you some background as you read it. So I don't want you to do a lot of work on it, I just want you to read it, and then we'll discuss it when we meet again in 2 weeks' time. Everybody okay on that? Yes. Okay, so I know you're much more comfortable sitting there, but incredibly the RT wasn't quite so good, was it, Miguel?
No. Although we have some breakups, so sorry about that, but.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, have a good afternoon.
All right, thanks.
Weekend, and thanks very much for giving me yourself.
Alright, did everybody see this? Take a look at that. Alright, please do, so that you can communicate via email, okay?
Yeah, so I would say.
Okay, we meet Saturday, March 9th, okay? Right here. And then we go back to the next place. March 12th. I sent some emails, but only few people got my emails. I emailed you a link to the video and directions. I also emailed the link to the video before the directions. But check the job here, folks. Yeah, that's right. No, I probably not. Everybody, when I send this link, you'll be able to find the next 3 hours. You'll be able to find out. Alright?
Check the email address on that.
Yeah, the answer on the front. And you can find out.
So when we go back down to the institute on Tuesdays, you will have a room for all of us.
Yeah, that room filled exactly 24. Yeah.
When we go back there, it's
Yeah. When we go back there, it's like that.
Yeah.
Hey, what's wrong? Also, the ROL E3.
Yeah,
You want this? Please, fill it in. Are we good?
Yeah, we got it. Come on. Yeah, right up the rap email address on there.
Okay, yeah. I see that.
Okay, so this was an extra copy.
All right, thanks.
Girl, listen to me. You see my girl going, right? Yeah.